Hello?
Everybody, welcome back to the Business Exchange. It's the show where we dive into ideas, people, and innovations shaping today's industry. I'm your host, Joseph, and today we're stepping into the world of industrial product development and the future of manufacturing. My guest is someone who lives at the intersection of design, engineering, and real world production. Tyler, founder of and director of design and development of at Gray Area Studio. Tyler and his team help companies in industrial equipment and technical product sectors bring ideas to life through manufacturing led design. So, today we're going to talk about working in manufacturing right now and what's changed in the industry and how companies should be planning for the future. Again, Tyler, thank you for joining the podcast.
No problem.
All right. So let's get it kicked off on your journey. So you have a strong background at the intersection of design and manufacturing. What led you to start Gray Area Studio, and what gap in the industry were you trying to fill?
Um, I guess yeah. It started when I was still in school. I launched a bag brand, and because we were small, didn't have a lot of startup cash. I wasn't just heading up the design. I was also managing the manufacturing and all of the processes based out of Vancouver. And it went from kind of me designing most of the time to 95% of my job being the manufacturing management and kind of running a small factory. And when you're working like that, you do realize that it is extremely tedious managing sewers, doing the bulk cutting, and
Right.
I kind of came across a realization that because the industry of garments and bags and everything, unlike aerospace or cars or anything else like that, those were quick to automate and they were quick to keep things over here, whether it's for reasons of national security or shipping or anything else like that. My industry very much focused on Asia and
Mm.
relying on a workforce that they didn't have to pay too much, but also to make a big profit. So a lot of the manufacturing was very much done the way it was done 100 years ago, just with a sewing machine and a worker. And
Right.
when I got into the position of managing that process, I saw a lot of wasted time and a lot of wasted effort. And I think you notice it the most when you're the one sitting behind the sewing machine or managing the people behind the sewing machine.
Yeah, yeah.
And it stops being quite as theoretical.
Yeah, gotcha. Hear you. Perfect. So for listeners who may not know you yet, how would you describe Gray Area Studio? Who you serve, the type of industry, technical products you work on, and what makes your approach unique?
Um, I would say our approach is fundamentally understanding the manufacturing process and layering that into design. Where a lot of design agencies or even companies for that matter, they'll start with a designer, they'll move on to a concept, and then they'll hand that off to a manufacturer without necessarily understanding how you build the product that you need to create. And this creates a bunch of friction at a whole bunch of different gates. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to eliminate a little bit of that wasted time. Um,
Right.
when I when I had the bag brand in Vancouver, I ended up working for Lululemon in their division at the time was called White Space. It's their innovation section of the business now, and instead of it being on the regular calendar of working where we would create products, send it to the factory, have it sampled out, and then it would be on store shelves after the manufacturing process. Instead, this was a team of a few material scientists, a biomechanical engineer, a few other materials PhDs, and some athletes. And we were working on product that was more 4 to 10 years down the pipeline. And this was very much a focus on what are the machines that are actually creating these products. And this is where I kind of learned a little bit more about the importance because I was working on engineered knit products. So an athlete would come up with a problem, and then I would be working directly with the guys that were building the machines to create the knit fabric.
Right.
They were what really then this process really stressed to me how important it was to understand the machine, because I'd be like,
Right.
oh hey, can you guys do this? They'd be like, no, that's impossible, Tyler. Like we can't put that together that way. And I'd be like, oh well, what about this? And then instead of me handing off the design to them, it would be like, hey, this is how the machine works. This is how this is put together, and these
Right.
are your constraints.
Right.
Instead of me handing off to them, it was more so I had to learn what the machine could do and then design
Hmm.
it to that. And that's the different lens that Gray Area looks at the design process through, is understanding how something's being built and then applying that to the design process to get rid of layers of sampling as well as just learning the beginning.
No, that seems very critical to in the operation of the machine to know its not only its limitations, but the things it can do that you might not even know it can do.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
what really can bring a design to the next level of being
Hmm.
like, hey, if we use this machine, it's unlocking this, this, and this.
Right, right. Excellent. So when you look across your projects and the companies you support, what's working really well right now in manufacturing and industrial product development?
Um, the area that I'm most excited about that I've been focusing on for the past few years has been radio frequency welding. Instead of just cutting and sewing a piece of fabric, you might use a TPU material to actually just with vibrations essentially just fuse the material together. And
Mm,
what this does is it allows you to create airtight product for obviously in the outdoor space having something be actually waterproof is a benefit. And I think for a long time people looked at RF welding as this is how you create water or airtight product, but they didn't think about it as this is how you build something differently and step out of a way of the way that things used to be made. Before it's you cut a piece of fabric, you stitch it together, you do
hmm.
the next stitch, next stitch, and it was always kind of having a human being involved with all of these different steps. Where with welding, you could have a laser cutting machine and then a jig and then having that shape into another form. It's starting to look at the actual manufacturing process through a different lens, and
Right.
I found it was a good tool in which to do that.
Yeah, and it seems like you're describing is really just getting and looking outside the box.
Yeah, and
You know.
that's the area that I found most interesting. Is I think that there's a lot of the kind of like garment and bag industry where if you look at a I don't know a design inspiration page, and whether this page or this board or whatever, whether it's an Addy or Nike or Terrace or any big brand, a lot of these designers are kind of collecting from the same sources and are drawing inspiration from the same kind of areas, whether
Right,
it's Hypebeast or whatever they're using as their research tool.
right.
And the thing that I found is one of the better ways to solve these problems is I had a hunting and fishing brand that or that I am working with, and the mandate was like these guys are going to be on bass boats flying across the water,
Hmm.
but they're not necessarily like doing a huge amount of the kind of exercise. They're very much standing on the boat, so
Yeah, yeah.
waterproofing is very much at the focal point of solving this problem more so than breathability that you would run into with like running product.
Right,
So
right.
when we were looking at inspiration for the project, we weren't really looking at other rainwear brands. We found these Russian scuba divers that are hanging out in the Arctic doing diving underneath sheepskin. Because
Wow.
that was the area where I found that was like the most extreme critical area of keeping water out and keeping you warm and keeping you dry. Because they're very much at the most extreme version of that, and that's the way that we would look at it is what kind of what's the most extreme side of the problem that we need to solve,
Right.
and
Yeah.
then how do we pull from that and then dumb it down to make it obviously fit within something slightly less extreme than
Yeah.
Siberian ice divers.
Yeah, yeah, no. And that makes sense. Go right to the top and then bring the solution down the size that's needed. Yeah. Good. From your experience, what separates companies that consistently produce successful products from the ones that struggle And second part of it, what behaviors or systems set them apart or yourself apart?
Um, I think again, it's understanding of all of the processes, um, and I think also the kind of the ownership of the process as well. One
Hmm.
thing that I did find working at bigger companies is there's kind of an employee mindset to problem solving.
Right.
Where it's like I've done my portion of this role. I can't technically get in trouble. I've done my handoff that I need to. Now
Right.
it's on to the next guy. Where
Yeah.
I find that brands that really produce great product, that everybody involved is thinking through all of the different steps of the process to say that, because I think a lot of designers and developers also know, like, when they do a handoff, if you do a handoff that's missing a few pieces or you haven't fully thought through a component of a design or how it interfaces with the material or the manufacturing process, I think there's sometimes there's a little bit of an incentive to be like, somebody else will figure this out. Like I know that there's
Right.
something going off in the back of my mind where I'm like, I don't know, but it's easy just to hand it off. And I think that
Right.
ownership of process at all levels of the business, I think, is really key. And then it's also the understanding of how something is actually built.
Right. Right. Good. Good. That makes total sense. So let's shift gears a little here. Um, what's changing? Manufacturing is evolving fast. Supply chains, automation, materials, sustainability pressures. What big shifts do you see coming in the next few years?
Um, I think the automation side of it is a huge component. You see even manufacturing costs in China as well as Vietnam. You can see the cost of that increasing and increasing, and
Right.
there is the motivation to start to automate more of these systems in order to lower the end cost. And then you also have the angle of it where kind of shipping things around the world and the logistics end. I'm sure from the past few months, everybody's noticed it's become a little dicier figuring out you make something here, how are you getting it here,
Yeah.
and what are going to be the costs in between.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think that that is a little bit of a wake up call for people that are producing product, well, especially in kind of like the military or medical space, is
Right.
to create a viable product at the cost that you want to hit. Um, Obviously, bringing things back to North America is a tough sell because at the end of the day, it's more expensive to produce.
Right.
But if you're able to integrate in technology that automates parts of systems in order to keep costs down, and you're able to eliminate components of the process and streamline how something's being built, and also cutting out a lot of the shipping component of it. Um,
Right.
I think that the kind of the realities of the world that we're in right now are starting to facilitate that move to bringing things back to North America to a certain degree within specific industries. Um, I suspect a lot of consumer product for the extended future will still be made overseas, just because of
Right.
the numbers. But I think there's specific areas where we're going to start to see them popping up in North America,
Right.
because there's a few factors that make it viable.
Right.
And the technology is now starting to catch up, where I think
Right.
everybody has wanted to be able to produce more things here, but I think now you're starting to get more technology kind of catching up to be able to facilitate that.
Do you think AI will play a big part in the manufacturing and like companies like yourself and others?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's well, even like if I think back to like my first job at Lululemon was I was a design assistant. So my job was to sit in a fitting as the senior designer was going through all of the different updates, doing the fitting, and then I would be updating drawings, and I would be communicating that directly to the factory and making sure that everything was updated within the system. Now, when I'm reviewing a design, a lot of the time I am chatting to ChatGPT to build out a list of change change this circumference to this,
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
by this amount, or update this, and then I can say put this in spreadsheet format so that this can be built
Yeah.
into my filing system. Also write this in email format to my client, and then write it in another email format to my to the factory that I'm working with. So
Yes.
you have the communication side of that you can see that, yeah, like a lot. I think that the nature of a lot of those types of jobs will be fundamentally changing, because a lot of them will be kind of cut out of the equation.
Yeah.
But that's also a double-edged sword, because a lot of the learning about this industry was me manually going through and doing these different operations and figuring out
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
to connect the initial idea and build in every single step to mass manufacturing. And now those processes, they're in my head. But if you have a younger designer now, I don't know if that information is just there. Like I think we're going to start to almost lose bits of information because we're starting to automate more of them as well.
Right, right. Well, I've always believed that with every company, people retire and such. That unfortunately you're losing a lot of information that's stuck in their brains. So, who knows? Maybe one day we'll have a helmet we can just put on and say, "Okay, thank you for your service, Mr. Smith. But we're going to download everything that you know and learned, so we can pass it on." So,
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
that's I find that to be, yeah. I find it's an interesting subject, the pass on of it, the pass on of information.
Hmm.
So I think, like, say even tailoring is a good example, where a lot of tailors back in the day, when you're building suiting, they the way that they built a pattern around the measurements that they would take from somebody, that was kind of their secret sauce. So essentially, their IP was how they built out the patterns to make a fine suit. But
Right.
because you wanted to keep that secret, a lot of that information didn't get passed on. So
Yeah.
you're reading old pattern drafting books, and it feels like some of the information is just like, there's just like a little bit where you're like, that's missing from this process, because one
Right.
thing didn't get passed on from this, and I think there's a lot of the process and the learning that you saw lost from that. I think we're going to see something similar too, where a lot of the traditional information will be lost, but I'm sure that there will be digital inputs that kind of fill in the gaps. But
Right.
in the same way that when you look at a 3D model, it's sometimes it's complex math that's making it smooth, not necessarily the actual dimensions.
Right.
So you start to run into the area of how much is the computer filling in the gaps, when really you should just admit that there's a hole there to
Yeah.
figure out
Yeah.
a rational way to actually fill that in.
Yeah. Perfect. No, that makes sense. So every company has a project that went sideways. Of course, without naming names, can you walk us through a situation that didn't go as planned, and what happened, and what did you take away from it?
Um, uh, yeah, we had one client that was it was a marijuana company, and they wanted to create a kind of a side sling pouch, and the parameters of the design were it had to fit around the body. They wanted to have a locking mechanism on it, and then inside of it we wanted to create an airtight pouch so that you
Right.
didn't have different fragrances moving about.
Yes. Yeah.
And we were dealing with a very small factory in Vancouver, and they were doing the cutting and having everything put together. And we kept getting updates from the factory saying everything's on track, and the client wanted to launch on 420, and they wanted to hit this timeline, but in my gut, I could feel like I wasn't getting the whole story from the factory. And it was just, but I think that it had to do with kind of the owner of the factory hadn't mapped out how complex the design was going to be. We had seen initial samples that looked good, but I don't think she wanted to admit that they were having trouble on their end, and
Right.
say, hey, no, this is fully well within our ability to produce. And I think in my mind, I was looking at it being like, I could see these red flags. I wasn't seeing updates on bulk, but her saying, hey, it's okay, was just enough for me to kind of be lazy mentally and be like, oh well, no, it's okay. She said it's fine. When in my gut, I knew that there was something going wrong.
Right.
And then yeah, it was one problem after the other. But like a day before, we find out that the airtight pouches hadn't shipped out of Hong Kong yet.
Oh.
There was a bunch of shipping problems, and then I get to the factory because I haven't gotten an update, and she's finished like 2 bags, and
Wow.
so but it was one of those things though where we wanted to deliver for the client. So one of my partners at the time hopped on the plane to Hong Kong. He met the airtight pouches there, and then just hopped on a flight back. And during this period of time, I took all of the bags from the factory, and me and an employee of mine just sewed for the next 2 days. And
Oh, wow.
so we kind of just absorbed the work that needed to be done,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
if something needed to be connected, then somebody gets on a plane to fix it. So all of these problems, they all have solutions. It's just
Yeah.
a matter of, are you willing to put in the amount of work to make it happen,
Yeah.
and are you willing to forego the sleep?
Yeah. Yeah. And rightly so. And you did the right thing. And I'm sure your customer was quite happy that you launched on time and everything. And sometimes we don't tell them all the problems we had because we don't want them to know.
No,
Because
I'd rather
Because at
not
the end
do
of the
it.
day,
Yeah,
we just want them to say, "Hey, here's the product for you. I got it to you." And so, no, where's your next PO for the next order?
exactly. Yeah.
Perfect. So, um, for smaller manufacturers and startups who have limited resources, what are the biggest mistakes they make when trying to scale a product or bring something new to the market?
Um, an understanding of time.
Right.
When you're solving a new problem, is you have to be willing to fail quickly. If you say, I think this is going to work, then you need to build it and test if it's going to work. I think
Yeah.
you see a lot of brands or even a lot of designers where they're like, this is a unique problem and I've created the perfect sketch for this, but I'm going to keep iterating on a sketch and testing and kind of erasing, redrawing, where at the end of the day they should have spent 10 minutes sketching it and then built it right away. And
Yeah.
allowing yourself to fail quickly and over again at the early stages so that you can refine it through a product. And then I would also connect the calendar side of that as well, where you do need to build in enough time within a process. If it takes if you think it's going to take 2 days to work through a design, it's going to take 5.
Yeah.
And then it's also putting together a calendar that integrates in not just the time that you have to put in, because obviously that's the thing that's always at the forefront of your mind. It's like, it takes me X amount of time to do this, but it might take a month for your fabric to come in, or your
Yeah.
hardware might need to do this, or
Yeah.
there might be a shipping problem at the Panama Canal. Whatever the problems are, you need to map out all of the different variables on timeline,
Right.
because at a certain point you can be so late on something that it doesn't matter if you had a good idea, you weren't able to execute.
Right. Right. Very good. So, well, let's just go into growth and future planning section. So, if you were advising a company in the industrial equipment or technical space on their next 12 to 24 months, what would you tell them to focus on first?
I would say think kind of looking at the way your business builds things now and mapping out what is the future of that. The way that you build
Right.
things now over the next 10 years, it's not going to stay the same. If you do want to be able to grow and be able to invent new methods of manufacture, create better product, you're going to have to integrate different ways of looking at how your product is built.
Right.
So
Right.
for example, like Gray Area is working on a few different simplified RF welded products, but the reason that we're starting with the simplified version is we want to figure out how to completely automate from laser cutting all the way to packaging the entire process of a few of our simpler products, just so that we can go through the thinking from start to finish of
Right.
exactly how every single step of this would be done. Does it need to be in a full factory? Could it be in a container? What are the parameters of what this actually looks like? And that's not because there's right now the RF welded like wallets that we're doing. They're not super costly to make, but
Oh,
going
good.
through the exercise of figuring out how would you automate this system um, using not just the mechanical tools of automation, or the robotic side of it, but also thinking about what are the AI tools that will help put all of these pieces together. Because the way that I look at a lot of manufacturing is kind of a modular approach, whether you have cutting, assembly, packaging, all of these different parts. You have to think, how do you automate the mechanical process, or can it be automated, or is the result even better if you automate it? Because all of those are up for
Right.
debate. But also, I feel like the AI software that you choose to work with will be the connective tissue between those different operations. So I think that it's just a good exercise to say, like, this is our best seller, or this is our best product, or this is what we want to be done in the future. Then this is how theoretically we would build out the future of how it's being made. So
Right.
you're not surprised when your competitor comes up with the same idea.
Yeah, 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 exactly. So when companies are deciding between building internal capability versus outsourcing or partnering with specialists, what factors should drive that decision?
Um, with the invention of processes, definitely confidentiality.
Right.
If you have a team in North America, and you're working on something very secretive that would be easy to copy, and your IP is at the core of what you're doing, what partners you're actually going to delegate to, I think
Yeah.
completely change. Um, if you're, yeah, like if you're an American company making an automated system for weapons, you're likely not going to build it in China.
Yeah.
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 So I
Yeah.
think there's a lot of that where
Yeah.
you need to figure out, if you're inventing something new, how do you actually protect yourself?
Right. Exactly. Good. And finally, what emerging technologies or design manufacturing practices do you think will create the next big wave of opportunity over the next few years?
Um, there's I think there's interesting stuff in the knitting world. I think that there's some interesting programs. I think a lot of I think I just got back from a material show, and I feel like wovens and waterproof material feels like it's stagnated a little bit,
Mm.
because of not being able to the outlawing of chemicals for eco reasons. It's kind of kneecapped their development a little bit. But if we were actually looking at kind of like the future of the way that I think that things should be able to be made, is not even something I've seen a ton of, and I'm sure that there's a lot of technical reasons why it is hard to do. But I think it is materials that can be sprayed on and set to create constructions, instead of even having to go through the process of weaving something and then putting it together, or
Right.
knitting something, putting it together, or creating all of these materials and then molding them around the shape. I think the future could be sprayed on to a form, and then you could build in the function of that in a similar way that the if you look at the automation of making shoes, it's a really technical problem, because if you're looking at it how a Air Force One is made, if you're looking at doing an injection molded sole, you're doing a cut and sew
Hmm.
upper, you're stitching and constructing this entire piece of footwear. Through that lens, the manufacturing process for automating that is extremely technical. But what if you just injection molded the whole thing out of foam like a crock? All of a sudden, you've created a
Yeah.
piece of footwear, and
Yeah.
it's the evolution of a technology that has unlocked that way of actually building a shoe. Whether or not it's
Right.
possibly good is a different story, but it's more so, how are you getting to the end result?
Yeah. Good. No, that makes sense. Perfect. So we're going to wrap up real quick. So, what's one book, article, or resource that shaped how you think about design and manufacturing? or any book that you've read recently, or that that's helped you in your business.
Actually, one of the things that has really allowed for Gray Area to move in the direction that I wanted to is building out the correct business structure. And
Right.
it was 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel. And
Oh,
and it was
nice.
very, very specifically about, had absolutely nothing to do with design really, but it had to do with how would you build a team? What are interesting ways of looking at the problem solving process? And
Right.
that's looking at it through that lens I found to be really helpful for how we built out Gray Area. There was a chapter about selecting business partners, and at the time I read that chapter, and I was just like, I've made a terrible mistake. And at that point, I knew that there were going to be changes within my business. It just took a few years to kind of come out the other end of it. But if
Yeah,
if I just read that maybe a year earlier, I think I would have gotten where I wanted to be a lot faster.
yeah. No, I hear you. I think it happens to all of us. What's one myth about manufacturing that you wish the industry would let go of?
Yeah. That it's just a factory handoff. Like, a lot of people look at it kind of just like, this is my tech pack, I hand it to the factory, and they need to do it how I say. It's definitely worth looking at manufacturers as partners and saying, how do we meet in the middle of this? Because at the end of the day,
Hmm.
the person on the sewing floor, the person managing those sewers, or the person who's working on the RF welder, all of those people know significantly more about that process than you do. And
Hmm.
when they say, and there's lots of times when you get pushback from a factory, it's because they want to do it in a way that's easier for them. But there's
Of
also
course.
a lot of truth to listening to what they say and say, like, okay, they're saying this for a good reason, and meeting in the middle and understanding each other in terms of, why is this being said? Is this being said out of avoiding a liability in the future, or
Yeah.
just because we don't want to build it? And figuring out which is which, it just requires just a communication pattern between both teams that allows them to figure out problems.
Yes, perfect. And my last question: what's one personal habit or practice that keeps your team sharp and your development process strong?
Um, Being hypercritical of designs, saying everybody, when you create a new design, a new sample, you look at it and everybody's excited about it at first, and it's very easy to focus on, oh, this is so cool. But a lot of my process will be looking at it and then being like, what are all of the failure points? What are all the things that we're not looking at here?
Hmm.
Because that will just allow you to kind of battle harden your designs, where it's very much around extreme testing and not getting tied up to any one concept. It's just quick iteration and throwing away bad ideas really quickly.
Right, right. Well, perfect. Good. Well, Tyler, it's been outstanding conversation. Thank you very much for your time. You brought real world insight into what's working, what's changing, what companies need to prepare for as manufacture continues to evolve. So, for everybody listening, if you want to learn more about Gray Area Studio or connect with Tyler, we've included all that in our show notes. So just scroll down and see there. Again, thanks for joining the Business Exchange, and I'm Joseph. Until next time, keep building, keep innovating, and keep pushing your industry forward. Take care.